so for the Redshift rendering section, we're going to be using Redshift, and if you're ready to follow along and work out of Houdini Indie and make the leap into that, get a little experience using third-party GPU render engine in Houdini, you might want to install Houdini and follow along. And it's not quite as simple as a process as you'll see as just running the installer. So we thought it would be a good idea to kind of go through and see if we could just kind of briefly go over that in the form of a tutorial, so that it isn't like you're just sort of left to your own devices trying to figure out how to modify the environment file and all that stuff. So it's really not as bad as it looks. The first time it's kind of sucks, but then after that you kind of get used to it. So let's just go through that process together. Here I'm at the Redshift webpage, so redshift3d.com, and let's just go grab the latest version of Redshift. Now I'm going to click the downloads up here, and at the time of this recording, it's the Redshift 2.6.51. 3.0 is still like in beta and not like fully production released, so I'm going to just sort of avoid that for now. And we'll go with the, we'll just click the Windows installer here. So I've already done that and downloaded my copy of the installer to my desktop. You can see that I've got that right there. So going back here, what we want to also do is check the documentation to see which version of Houdini is supported. So up here in the support section, I'm going to go to the documentation and follow that to the Houdini section right here. And then under getting started on the left-hand side and installation, we can see installing Redshift on Windows. So let's click that. And then if we scroll down a little bit, you can see here in the middle of the page, there's this Houdini plugin configuration. So let's click on that real quick. This sort of outlines all the weird quirks about installing Houdini or installing Redshift for Houdini. And it's just important to kind of take a look at this. First things first, though. So right here, this is where it tells you which versions of Houdini are supported. It's pretty buried inside of the documentation, which is kind of a bummer. And if we click on it, you can see that it drops down this list for us and shows all the versions of Houdini that are supported by the current version of Redshift according to the documents. And if you look at the documentation, it's saying Houdini 17.5.360 is supported from Redshift 2.6.47 to the last available. Well, that's weird. So if we go back to Redshift 3D, what we just downloaded was the version 2.6.51. So why is the docs only talking about 2.6.47? I don't know why, but it seems like this is just a little bit out of date. So what I actually would do in this situation where I'm seeing a version number discrepancy between the actual product download and what's in the documentation is I would go back to the Redshift website and check out the forums. So I'm going to click this forums button up here. I'm going to go down here and see that we've got this new version announcements for customer builds. So if I click on that, I can find that 2.6.51 is now available, link right here, or whatever the most recent version is of Redshift that you're using. And if I click on that, you can see that in the release notes, sometimes it will identify new versions of Houdini that are supported and or new versions that are dropped. So you can see here it's dropped support for Houdini version 17.5.360. Which is interesting because that's the version that it says is supported from 4.7 to the last available. So depending on how you run your setup at home or at work or whatever, you may need to pick your version of Redshift based off of what version of Houdini you're running, or the opposite, you might need to pick the version of Houdini you're running based off of the version of Redshift that you have access to. So all sorts of little kind of quirky things about trying to figure out which versions of Houdini and or Redshift you need to use. So since I can see here in the forum post that this latest version that is supported is Houdini 17.5.460. Houdini 18 is also supported, which came out during the production of this course. We will be covering that and making updates later on as as new content for Houdini 18 becomes more relevant. But for right now, as this course was done in Houdini 17.5, I would encourage you to continue to follow along with that if possible. But if you want to go through it using Houdini 18, by all means, go for it. So Houdini 17.5.460. How do we get that? Well, we go over to the side effects website. So sideeffects.com, and you just want to log into your account, and you say, under this Get menu, you go to download. Download's going to take you to the latest version, the latest and greatest, which is build 18.0.287. But we need 17.5.460 according to that forum post. So I'm just going to scroll down here and check out this production build section. If you click on that, that will give you access to older production builds. And you can see that they removed that 17.5.360 version or whatever. That's probably why they dropped support for it with this new version of Redshift. So that version we're looking, 17.5.460, you can find it right here for Windows. And I'm going to just click that to download it, and it will, start the download, etc. I'm just going to cancel that because I already downloaded and installed it. So the next thing to do is to actually go and run the installer. So I'm going to double click the Redshift installer I downloaded, and it's going to pop up. And it totally crashed my video recording, but we're back here, and you can see that we're just going to follow through the normal installation process here. So let's click next. Yeah, welcome. Okay, I agree to the software agreement. Cool. And you can see that it gives you the option to choose what all things you want to install it for. Looks like I have a copy of Maya still on my computer, Cinema 4D, and Houdini 18, it looks like is supported. I also want to, it looks like it's going to install for Redshift for Houdini 17 and all these other versions of Houdini automatically. So let's click the next button, and it's got all the R18, 20, 21 locations, and then your thing where you say yes. This is more or less just them saying, like, make sure you uninstall it and release your license before you, proceed with, reformatting your computer or whatever. So install, and there it goes. Previous version, want to uninstall it, yes. And finally, this increased delay to blah, blah, blah. Next. Okay, and then finally finish. Cool. So now one might think we could go and launch Houdini and everything's going to be there. So let's do that and see what happens. So Houdini's up here, and you can see that up here in the menu area, there is no Redshift dropdown, which is where there would normally be a Redshift dropdown menu right here. And this is where the tricky part comes in. We have to modify the environment file. So if we go back to the documentation of the Redshift Houdini plugin configuration, what we do is if we scroll down a little ways, you can see that the plugin installation in Windows requires that you run the exe, and then after installation, it will install the plugin to a certain location. And then basically what we need to do is modify the Houdini environment file to point to the location of the Houdini Redshift plugin. And to get it to do that, we basically need to copy this little chunk of text and paste it into our environment file. The environment file, so I'm selecting that, hitting Control-C to copy it, the usual. And then what we need to do is find our Houdini environment file. So that is located in your Documents section under whichever version of Houdini you're on. For me, it's 17.5 right now. This could change, but at any rate, for whatever .5 version of .0.5 version of Houdini that you're on, you'll have a new environment file, and it'll be located inside this folder. So it's just a text document. If it doesn't open with a text editor, you can, say open with or whatever, Notepad, and it'll bring it up. And this is the default Houdini environment file. So I'm just going to go down here and paste that little chunk of text that I copied out of the document here. And then I'm just going to hit Control-S to save the environment file. And then let's relaunch Houdini. So Houdini's still open. I'm just going to close it. Closed, and let's open it up again. I'm going to close this file just to be safe too. since we've already saved it and closed it, everything should be good. All right, so now Houdini is open. You can see that the Redshift menu has indeed appeared up here. And what we could do just to check to make sure it's working is maybe I'll control click the sphere to create one right there. And then over here, if your Redshift shelf hasn't appeared yet, you can go and hit this plus icon, shelves, and then choose Redshift down here. So if I click on this tab, go to the Redshift shelf and click this Redshift hexagon logo thingy, and it'll create our Redshift outputs. And we can just quickly go up to the Redshift menu, open the render view, and fire off a quick render. And you can see that it is rendering this amazing looking sphere with just the most dynamic light setup ever. But at any rate, I know that was slightly a little bit more involved than a normal setup, but hopefully that gets you up and running and ready to go along, to follow along with any of the Redshift lessons you want to follow along with. All right, we'll see you in the next lesson.